You guys ready?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. What is going on, all you awesome superhero aficionados? This is the Heroes and Mutants podcast, your number one source of superhero talk and all things superheroes. Brought to you by Howard Passion Entertainment. I'm Nick with my co-hosts Jimmy and Eric. How you guys doing today? Everybody doing good?
Pretty good.
Yeah,
pretty good.
chilling. I'm doing good.
Yeah, there's not really a whole lot going on besides a certain show that we're going to get to. Just a lot of news and some casting updates and information, but not so much a lot of concrete stuff going on. But yeah, a lot of good things on the horizon. And with all that being said, there's a lot of development over this week. So one of the things and something I had been thinking about for a while was that there was a lot of rumors and reports about Iron Man and Robert Downey Jr. possibly returning. I think we hadn't really heard any update since I think around like 2020 when he did the Dr. Dolittle movie, and there were reports about him coming back. But in a recent interview of a Q&A on the Jeff Goldsmith podcast, the writing team behind the Homecoming trilogy said bringing back Iron Man was a non-starter and that they knew after Far From Home they would be moving on from the character. Is there any event/moment you guys would like to see Iron Man appear in the MCU again, or is it better just to leave it as is?
Oh no. I feel like leaving him gone is probably best. But you know that in like 2-3 years, if he comes back for something, it's gonna be a big deal. Like it's regardless. I think having him come back almost like an AI, kind of how like Jarvis was, I think that would be pretty cool. To have like hints of Tony Stark, but not necessarily bring back the character from death. Because what that does essentially, it kind of makes any death in the MCU really like
Not have any merit or meaning, right?
Yeah, they're just gonna come back, which happens in the comic books all the time. But I mean that's kind of what happens in the comic books. Like when someone dies, it's just like, oh, okay, well, we'll see. They'll come back in a few years or maybe a few months even.
Or decades in the case of Bucky. Or Jason
Bucky.
Todd was like 15, 16 years, whatever it was.
Exactly. They end up bringing it back. So it kind of makes deaths not as important, not as impactful. So
right.
In my opinion, I don't want to see him come back.
What do you think, Jimmy?
I feel like the story's over in terms of the MCU. And I know comic books do it all the time, and I get it. But I think for the movie universe to make this more impactful, I think it should stay as it is. I think kind of reviving it would do what Eric said. It would make any death that happens seem inconsequential or meaningless. It would be like if somebody dies, oh, it doesn't matter. They're not really dead. There has to be some kind of stakes at some point. So I think the best thing would probably, if they did, would be like Eric said, like AI. That's acceptable, but full on resurrection. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's going to be as effective in live action the way it works in comic books, and I think it should be. And I feel like they have so much to work with now. At some point they're gonna have to bring in the X-Men. They got a new Spider-Man trilogy coming up. I don't see why they have to go back to Iron Man. I feel like there's Moon Knight coming up. I feel like there's a lot of Marvel to look forward to.
Definitely.
That we don't need to do that.
Yeah. Same here. And I know that was something that was a real big point of emphasis as far as our complaints with this version of Spider-Man, was that he was essentially an Iron Man Jr. and wasn't really that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man that we knew and loved from the comics. So the way that they had written the character, it made sense just because of what the MCU was doing. But then after, in Far From Home, I was like, okay, hopefully this will be the last time we see, it's not that they can't bring him up organically in some kind of way, but to have it, I just want to be just like him, or I want having all this technology and all of that impact. I think it takes away from a character like Spider-Man, because obviously he goes through his own growth and development on his own, and having that important, like it made sense of what the MCU was doing and how they built that up. But I'm perfectly fine with this. I think because of the sacrifice he had made from where starting the MCU and then ending it where it was, like I felt like that was the dawn of a new era and a new beginning that was going to happen. So I think if you have him back in some sort of capacity, aside from just like an AI, I think that's perfectly suitable and perfectly fine. I would be okay with something like that. But to have him come back in some form of capacity where he's there physically, I just think it would take away a lot from the impact and the death and the significance of what his sacrifice really meant. So I'm perfectly on board with that.
Yeah.
But moving on from that, speaking on Spider-Man, we finally recently got an interview with all three Spider-Man. Tom revealed that while he doesn't want to be done with the character, if it happens, he's okay with it and letting someone else take the helm. While Toby said that his appearance in No Way Home doesn't close a chapter on his version. So many fanboy moments from this interview were freaking awesome. Biggest takeaways, and do you think any or all of them will have their own solo film in the future? And who is most likely to have his own film?
I think that, I mean, despite what Tom Holland says, he needs to shut up. There's going to be another trilogy. I'm sorry.
He's trying too hard. He went from spoiling everything to like saying the exact opposite just to avoid spoiling anything.
No.
Yeah. And also, so he's coming back.
Also, we need to see Spider-Man be the leader in the Avengers now that he's like the main Marvel character. And I feel like it would be a waste to get rid of him after No Way Home basically fixed everything that we had complaints about. It made Spider-Man. Yeah. Now I think it's time to see a trilogy of him as the classic comic book rendition of Spider-Man.
Yeah, I don't think Spider-Man is going to be a leader with the Avengers. I think the way this last movie ended kind of let him be his own and kind of separate himself from the Avengers. And I think that's planned. I think if I'm Disney, I don't want the leader of the Avengers to be owned by another company, because that just gives them too much leverage.
You got a point.
Too much power. And the way things ended right now, it leaves it open-ended to the point where Sony can do their own things with Spider-Man, and there can still be crossovers here and there, but the Disney's characters don't need to rely on Spider-Man to come in. And I guess just seeing it from like a business perspective, it doesn't make too much sense to make Spider-Man head the Avengers.
Okay, you're right. Actually, from a business perspective, it makes sense. But from a storytelling perspective, I would like to see one where he grows into it. Maybe by the end of the trilogy, hopefully at least one movie.
Yeah.
As for the other two, I'm pretty sure Tobey Maguire is going to be coming back. I don't think he's ever going to have a new solo film. But I'm going to be shocked if he's not in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I'm pretty sure he's going to be in that.
Especially with Sam Raimi at the helm.
Oh, yeah. There's no way they're not going to go and revisit the I mean, it's about the multiverse, and they just opened it up. And you're not going to bring Sam Raimi back if Sam Raimi can't, revisit a Raimi-verse. But if anybody was going to get a new one, it would be Andrew Garfield. Yeah. Only because I feel like that's the one that had, like, the least chance. There's still more story to tell. It's the one that has the fans most excited. As much as people were excited to see Tobey Maguire come back more than anything, it seems like once No Way Home came out, what most people want to see is Andrew Garfield come back. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's in Morbius, if that's why they pushed the shooting, if they did some reshoots and kind of rescheduling. So if any other Spider-Man comes back for a full-on movie, I would put my money on Andrew Garfield, not Tobey Maguire. Though I think Tobey Maguire will appear again, just not
definitely.
Yeah, I agree with you, because there was still, even in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, it was still open-ended where this Sinister Six could come in. And with Andrew Garfield being able to come back and kind of have a new lease on who he is, just from the events of Spider-Man No Way Home, I think he'll be able to kind of come back into his own as Spider-Man, and then they'll bring back Electro with it, right? They'll bring back Jamie Foxx there, and I think there's new interest in this other Spider-Man universe that could still cross over potentially at any time with the MCU universe, right? Mm-hmm. And I think if they make canon like Venom being in that universe as well, I think they can almost come back from Venom 2 a bit and have like Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man versus Tom Hardy's Venom, even though it's not as good as I really wanted to see Tom Holland's Spider-Man against his Venom, but I'd be okay with seeing Andrew Garfield's version of Spider-Man versus Tom Hardy's Venom. I think that would be really cool to see play out on screen, and that'll give Sony an opportunity to still do their own thing and not have to rely too much on the MCU.
And it'll probably give the Tom Holland version more freedom if Sony feels like they have something to fall back on.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
Well, I do think Tom is going to be back in some capacity. It could be a power ploy and a power move and him trying to negotiate a better contract.
he's gonna
But
be
just given the
back.
fact that he's one of the most bankable stars right now and they have him as Spider-Man and No Way Home was as well received as it was and did as well in the box office as it did, I think for sure he's going to be, I don't know, maybe another
He's
trilogy, but he's definitely going to have a few more solo films.
I
So,
think he's just leveraging thing because he's like on the cover of every freaking magazine
mm,
now. He's all
yeah,
over social media. He's in so many projects. He's
exactly.
the it boy in Hollywood. So I think he's just trying to leverage some extra extra money.
Probably. I wouldn't doubt it.
Why not?
But I mean, I know he had
Yeah.
talked about not exactly having as much freedom and the possibility of him starting a family. I know like that got thrown out there too. So I can kind of see where it was. He's been attached to this role for what, like 5, 6, 7, going on 7 years now. So I kind of understand that. But if the drive is there and the audience wants it, I don't see why he wouldn't come back. I do think that they're
Yeah.
probably gonna bring in Miles Morales at some point, but I
Yeah.
think it's gonna be in the case of like the Spider-Man games where they're gonna be around. I don't think it's gonna result in them killing off Tom, maybe somewhere, unless that's somewhere far down the line. But I would like to see them
I
interact with
don't
each
see
other.
I don't see Miles becoming like the main Spider-Man until
I
like towards the end of Tom Holland's run. And it's all
exactly,
for the sake of the MCU. They're gonna want to like stretch it out as much as possible. You don't want to like blow out another Spider-Man and then kind of have them be around the same age and go out at the same time. I think it's smarter for them to hold off on Miles until
Probably. Yeah.
exactly.
the end of his run.
But I think between all of them, I can definitely. I think Toby. I'm sorry. I think Tom and Andrew for sure are going to have their own solo movies. Andrew, just because of how well received and how he was a standout for a lot of people in terms of, while all the Spider-Man were good, but as far as Andrew having such an emotional impact on the story and then as like Eric was saying, there was a lot things left open to interpretation or as far as like the Sinister Six and where the Amazing Spider-Man 2 ended. And we know that there's still a lot going on, and the possibility of him being the Spider-Man of the Morbius and Venom verse or Sony verse, whatever the hell that's called.
Mhm.
I think that's going to definitely, a lot of appeal is going to go to that, and there's going to be a lot of a big push to have him come back as Spider-Man and revitalize his franchise. Toby, I think, just given his age, like he did seem very optimistic and very much that he wants to come back in some form of capacity. Just given his age, I don't exactly think we're going to be seeing. Maybe we can see a solo film, but it would have to happen within the next what 2-3 years because he's
But the
pushing
thing
50.
is,
But
I
definitely,
don't
as far
see
as
that
like him
happening though.
popping up in other movies, I think is definitely a sure chance.
Yeah, I don't see Tobey Maguire coming back for a solo movie, but I'm pretty sure based on the things that he said, I get the feeling that he's hinting that he's gonna further his story arc in Doctor Strange, and I'm okay with that. I feel like Toby has gotten the most full, complete Spider-Man arc at this point, so he's the
Mhm.
one who
Yeah.
needs it the least.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's and interesting. Moving on from that, we got some comic news, and this is stuff that's going to ruffle some feathers and going to be a WTF moment for sure. But DC will end the Justice League comic series and kill off major characters in this April's Justice League number 75. Writer Joshua Williamson had this to say about what influenced this decision. Quote, "We've been building to the death of the Justice League for the last year across the main line. I remember buying Death of Superman 30 years ago, referencing the Man of Steel's demise in 1993's Superman 75. And now we have an opportunity to take that idea and go bigger with it. Justice League 75 allows us to showcase why the Justice League are comics' greatest heroes, as we show the aftermath of the loss against the biggest threat ever and its impact on the DCU. Pretty bold idea, but considering DC is notorious for rebooting their timelines, having crisis level events every few years, does this hold any kind of merit or does it just feel
No,
like shock
no,
value?"
because they're gonna be back by the end of the year. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of 2022 the Justice League is coming back. And doesn't DC do this like every decade or so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They kind of low key reboot it. And
Because
I
I mean,
understand.
even in the last 10 years
Yeah,
from Flashpoint, there's been what 3 or 4 crisis rebooting level
yeah,
events.
yeah, and I understand the need to reboot from time to time because the mythology gets so complex and complicated and so hard to keep track of with so many different artists and writers doing different things with different comics. So I understand the need, and I'm sure it'll be a good story. But I don't look at it as this Titanic event because they're going to be back. They're not going to kill the DC is not killing off the Justice League permanently. There's no way that's going to
Of
happen.
course not.
So
I mean, even with the death of Superman, I mean, he was essentially in kind of like a cryostasis
that was like
to
back
recover.
when
Like,
those events were a little different. I think they had like when Death of Superman came out, which was a while ago now. I think that like that had more impact and meaning than these days when they announced that, oh, a killer, yeah, sure, he's gone, he's coming back.
exactly.
Yeah, it's a different era. I don't.
What do you think, Eric?
Honestly, I don't really care. They can stay dead. Justice League doesn't have to come back. I never thought DC actually did team ups as well as Marvel did.
You got a point.
And like my favorite team ups from DC are literally just the ones that are just Batman and Superman, like without the rest of the
world's
Justice League.
finest.
Yeah. And honestly, I think those are my favorite stories. When it comes to the Justice League, I feel like yes, they fight these huge threats, but they're just also overpowered on their own to make it almost like
It's like too many gods.
yeah, it's like
Okay.
like Superman probably could have done this on his own. Batman with enough time could kill the majority of the Justice League's enemies on his own too.
I mean, heck, when you think about even the Flash and everything
Even
that he
Wonder
can do, and
Woman.
his ability to just
Yeah.
pretty much do whatever and create a whole freaking new timeline because he's just that freaking fast. I mean, that really puts things into perspective on
And
it.
then
So
Wonder Woman is the daughter of Zeus, so she's basically a goddess, like literally a goddess.
Yeah.
I actually think as a DC fan, the strength of most of DC characters comes from their individual stories.
Exactly.
I kind of agree with
yeah, right.
more than their.
I mean,
Yeah.
the world's finest, Batman and Superman, they had a lot of, especially that Public Enemies run where they were on the run and Lex Luthor became the president. That was a really great, like, they have a lot of great stories where they, talk about the humanity of Superman and that Batman's perceived God status and kind of how that, but then he's actually human and he's actually a god. Like, there's a lot of really interesting dynamics there, but I see what you mean.
Yeah. I think when it comes to Marvel, I think they do a good job of creating events and like short series. And I feel like DC should just focus on that for their big team ups like the Justice League. Like their Detective Comics, like the best part about them is them figuring out what's going, like Batman being the world's greatest detective. Like I loved reading those series with him where Bruce is actually trying to figure out what's going on, right? Like those are my favorite stories. Is not like this high level threat that you're just fighting off as the Justice League. So I think it's good that they're gonna kind of dismantle the Justice League for a bit, because I don't think those comics do as well as their individual storylines do.
I agree.
Yeah, big
and
point.
Batman specifically, I think out of all of them, I think he's the character that works best within his own stories, separated. I mean, I like when he like comes across Superman and Wonder Woman. That's cool and all, but I think the best Batman stories are, like Eric said, that are ones about Batman being a detective at a lower level. I mean, still big threats, but not earth-shattering, universe-shattering.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when it comes to like Marvel comics, they're not as overpowered. Like you see the X-Men, each of them have like one trait, right? And they have to work together. A Fantastic Four, same thing. Like you need those groups to come together. And then even in Marvel comics, you don't have a regular Avengers series. In the Marvel comics, the Avengers come together from different storylines for a higher threat, like Secret Wars, things like that, or like the whole Civil War. The Civil War 2 is one of my favorite series, and I think bringing the Avengers together for those high level threats has worked for them, and I think DC can really do good by just letting Justice League go for a bit, and they're gonna come back later, so which is fine. But just bring them back when there's a threat that big. What this makes it sound like the Justice League is gonna like die. I think it's just gonna like dismantle, right? Like there just won't be the Justice League anymore.
Yeah, or they're just gonna have like some other characters taking their place and not have the current team that we're used to, or like the main team that we're used to.
Change their name, the League of Justice.
I also don't think that the Justice League needs to be a regular series.
Yeah.
Just because, like what you said, and it's only because, like you said, they're all so overpowered that you need to come up with like an absurdly high, ridiculous level threat that would require 10 demigods to come together together to fight something. So the threats have to be absurd.
Yeah. I think the longer they let the Justice League, they don't do a Justice League series, the better it'll be once they return.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
I definitely see that. I definitely, yeah, because I'm more into DC when it comes to comics as opposed to Marvel. Not exactly that I favor them hugely or like that. I'm so much of a bigger fan than them, but just by a little bit, just because I think I gravitate a little bit more to those characters. But that is true, because the one, like, a lot of the titles that I do read are those ones about their own stories and not so much of
Yeah.
team ups aside from like the world's finest. So I definitely see that point coming from you, Eric, and I can see how like Marvel does a better job of having their
Yeah.
teams together and having like those comics and those things like coincide with each other better and having better reasons for those characters being around and interacting with each other. And even though they're better together, they're still at some kind of odd, or there's still some kind of way that they can fail. But when you see the Justice League, you're like, fuck, you guys got Martian Manhunter, you guys got Flash, you got
Yeah.
Superman. That's like those are like one man wrecking crews.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
I see it from that standpoint. So it sounds like an interesting move that they're doing, but we'll wait to see. It does feel like shock value at this point, but we'll
Yeah.
just wait to see what happens when it comes to that. So moving on from that, there's been a lot of rumors and stuff circulating about the Flash movie, and
Another reset.
yeah. So supposedly it says that they're straying away into a new continuity, mainly to separate itself from what Snyder established. That's also, but then there's also reports that it's going to take the Snyderverse of Justice League as canon, and that there's also, big thing is that there's going to be a new Trinity. So just and this actually comes from Grace Randolph. And she's not somebody who's like an insider, but she seems to have a lot of good source and a lot of good information, and that she's connected pretty well. And she says in a tweet, as I've told you with Update, The Flash is Ben Affleck's final appearance. All footage of Cavill used on TV, and obviously we know that this is true because Ben Affleck has gone on the record to say that he's done with Batman and done with the superhero genre as a whole. New Justice League is formed. Supergirl is new Superman. Keaton working with Black Canary picks Batgirl as new Batman, and this is new DC. Let's be open-minded and give it a fair shot. And also from that, apparently, like, there's a lot of weird stuff going on, and that people are saying, okay, that some people have taken this as debunking yesterday's report, as that the rumors are true. The Flash will establish a new DCEU universe. However, this new continuity will preserve the world that Snyder built. And this actually goes back. Apparently, a fan sent a DM to Ezra Miller, who plays the Flash, that fans are going crazy thinking the movie is erasing Zack's movies. They don't see the potential this movie will bring. He went on to say, no power force in any known megaverse would or could ever erase Zack Snyder's mighty works. You can take that quote, take that to the bank, to the press, to the schools, to the military, and the other pillar of capitalism. I'm forgetting because of that thing where that thing where if you try to think of a group of things, you always forget one of them.
Was that before or after he went on his weird KKK threat rant?
Probably around the same time, knowing.
Okay,
it sounds
right.
like that matches up with exactly that. But just with all this going on, what do you guys think, and what do you guys make of all of that?
Okay, I actually, this is what I think is going to happen. This is why I think it's a good thing. And it goes back to something that Eric said about Marvel and DC and about their different strengths, and how Marvel is better with team ups and like than DC is. From what I understand, this is what they're going to do. And this is the only thing that makes sense. And they're making Michael Keaton canon as a Batman over multiple films in the DCEU, and they're not erasing Zack Snyder. Also, here's another thing that is interesting. The Aquaman movies, the James Wan Aquaman movies, are following the continuity of Zack Snyder's Justice League. They're not paying attention to the theatrical one. And what I think is happening, why I think this is a good thing, is it seems like what they want to do is the multiverse. They're just going to open it up to a very wide multiverse where they could traverse freely these different versions of these characters. And I think that might work because I think the best DC movies are mostly the ones outside of the DCU. I mean, I like Wonder Woman and a lot of them are good, but like the Dark Knight, the best Batman stuff is the stuff that takes place completely outside of a DC universe. A lot of the Watchmen stuff. So what I think is going to happen is they're going to make it so all of it is canon, but each superhero is going to have like a different style and a different look. Whereas in Marvel with the MCU, they try to keep it all very uniform as one world, and it works very well for their team ups. And I think they got that down. I think it's better to open up a multiverse that way, that they can tell each of their individual stories without worrying too much about what's happening in the in the main universe. Whether it's, so it'll open up to the Joker movies, a new Robert Pattinson Batman. So I'm okay with it if that's the way that they're going. If they were completely erasing the Zack Snyder stuff, that would really be stupid. But the only thing that makes sense to me is the multiverse aspect, since Aquaman is still acknowledging Zack Snyder, and Michael Keaton's Batman is only going to be able to exist in the DCU logically, if only if you can have these multiverse crossovers, because it wouldn't make sense that Michael Keaton's Batman is now part of the DCEU magically. That doesn't really make any sense at all.
Exactly.
So I think it's the best thing for them, and I think it'll make it so that they could concentrate on their individual stories a little bit better. I don't know what to make of the Wonder Woman, Supergirl, and Batgirl being the new Trinity. I guess that's more acceptable if there's a multiverse. It's questionable. And look, I understand the need. Look, I consider myself a pretty progressive person. I understand the need for more female superheroes and all that. But I don't know if we need to do that before seeing like Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman at least one more time in the future, or at least establish something a little bit more with them. That does seem a tad bit forced, and I like Batgirl a lot as a character, so I want to see what they do with that. But I'm mostly positive about it, but there are a few things that could go wrong with that approach at the same time.
Yeah, I think it starts getting kind of convoluted, but I agree with you that having the multiverse open up like that and be freely explorable would definitely help them, especially with like what we've seen in the films, in the shows. I mean, like being able to get well established shows and characters from those shows to interact with the movies is going to be good for them, and this is a way for them to do that retroactively versus what the MCU is doing. Obviously they control all the shows, so they control all the shows. They have the same production on there, even though they have different directors and everything. They're obviously going to have their own spin on it. They have an overarching story that they want to tell, and they have control over what stories are told on the shows. Whereas here in the DC, you don't have that same level of control, and you can clearly see it. Like in Titans, you have another version of Batman. You have a different Bruce Wayne there. But I mean, it'd be really cool to see the Nightwing from there, like cross over and maybe do something with like the new Batgirl series, right?
Yeah.
Like that'd be really interesting to see. And if this Flash movie is able to do that, I think it'd be really good for DCU to make those things possibility, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
I like the multiverse concept, and I think it would serve their style of storytelling better. Because, like I said, most of the best DC projects are not part of like an established DC universe together.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to see. Oh, keep going, Jimmy.
And also, it's not really the multiverse exists in both Marvel and DC, so it's not like it's not being comic book accurate by doing that. There's
Exactly.
so it's still faithful in a way.
Yeah. Well, I would like to see everything be concurrent and all exist in the same universe. What you guys do say does make sense. A lot of their better stuff in the media has been this, like the solo films, Wonder Woman, first one, Shazam, Aquaman,
Joker.
Joker. Suicide Squad, you can kind of say, even though that's a little bit more of a team up, but it does, I don't know how you can really say about that one, but it's a little bit more focused. Even though it is a team up, it still was like better than Justice League. So, well, I mean the theatrical one, but I just think that I think it makes sense to have it on the multiverse aspect, just because that'll allow them to have free reign and give them the freedom to do whatever they want and not have to focus on being shackled by continuity and just having to be able to do stories in their own right. So even though something like Titans, it would be cool to see Brenton Thwaites cross over as Nightwing. I don't exactly know if that's going to be a possibility. With the whole Trinity aspect about them replacing, it does seem a little bit weird. It seems a little bit forced. I think the main thing for me is that we haven't fully even established this version of Superman. I think it can kind of make sense for Batman because he's been Batman for 20 years. In terms of continuity, we don't really we haven't been around him so much. If something for someone to take over somebody like Captain America's place, for Sam to take over his place, that makes sense because we had so much time to grow and we saw him as Captain America throughout his whole run. And we had like 10 years with that character, 7-8 years, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
But for something like this, to have them take over their legacy, it just feels like it has no merit or has no real value, because it's like, well, we didn't really know so much about these versions of these characters because we didn't really we didn't really have them on an arc, and there was only a few appearances and then they're getting replaced. That's
especially weird to force it on Batgirl, but we'll see how the movie does it, because Batgirl has a very long arc that takes place over, in comic book terms, it takes place over a very long period of time, over years. And
exactly.
Various formations she goes through. So it I don't know how they're going to handle that. Batgirl just has too much, like, I feel like they would have had to have spent 10 years with Batgirl in order for that to be valid.
Yeah.
Or at 7 or 8 years, or had a handful of films.
I think part of the problem here is almost comes down to semantics. It's like, we're saying that these three are going to replace the Justice League. And I think that's the key word, that replace. Like, you're not going to be able to replace Superman and Batman in that way. I think if they had just come out and say, hey, look, this is going to be a new team of Superwomen, let's do it. It sounds dope. Like, I would definitely watch it. But I think the fact that it's being said that this is going to be the new Justice League, I don't know who's been saying this, right? I don't know if it came from these reports, but it's saying like these are going to be our big three now. I think just almost putting them on a pedestal before we even see who they are and
exactly
and what their story is. I think that's the problem that I see.
Yeah,
because I don't see a problem with 3 women coming together to be a super team and being the like best team in the DCEU. That's
birds
awesome.
of prey.
Yeah,
Birds of prey.
Exactly. And yeah, I don't see that as a problem at all. But I think they're almost setting it up for that comparison to especially since we just had Zack Snyder's Justice League. They're setting it up as a comparison to that Justice League, and that's doomed to fail as of now. Like that, you can't create those comparisons right off the bat. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't know why they didn't do what you just said. If they wanted to do that, it's a universe. They could freely team up with each other. There's no reason for it to be the new Justice League. They could have just had a movie where Wonder Woman teams up with Batgirl and Supergirl, and it didn't have to be called the Justice League. And
call it
replacing it.
Yeah, call it their own name. Like,
yeah.
I mean, James Gunn has been doing whatever the heck he wants with the characters anyway. Like, he's not following comic book continuity. And we'll talk about that more on Peacemaker.
Yeah.
But just because there's a comic book history doesn't mean that you need to follow it per se. And yeah, that you could definitely create your own team up that doesn't have to be the Justice League. Like, I think probably, I don't know, it's probably the bigger corporations like that are coming in and saying, hey, we need to have the title Justice League on this movie in 2 to 3 years with these 3. So I don't know. I think that's setting them up for failure in my opinion.
The only way I see this working, or the thing that I think is a positive about all of this, is the fact of we see these characters in the very beginning, or we are allowed to grow with them, and they're allowed to go on their arc and have their own story across multiple years. So I do, from that aspect, I do feel that is probably one of the only bright spots for me. But at the same time, it just with that, if this whole thing is just a rebranding, oh, this is the new Justice League, this is the new Trinity, it doesn't exactly have to be like this. Don't understand why it couldn't have been like that. You know, they could have been the Tremendous 3 or something like that. I don't know, whatever the hell they want to come up with. But some interesting news. The Flash comes out later this year. I guess we're gonna see how all that develops, and future is looking a little bit weird, but at least
we'll see.
And last but not least, we have the most exciting topic for today. I know this is at least the most exciting topic for Eric. I can just see the smile, and he's been writing down so many notes. I think he told us he has 1,000 pages of notes that he had on this show. But Peacemaker is here. We're finally able to talk about it. It's 5 episodes deep, and
6
it is pretty
deep.
6 today.
6. Whatever, same thing.
Point is, if you guys didn't see it, only thing I'm going to say really quick.
I saw it, but
okay, if you didn't, don't spoil, because I think only Eric, you've only seen the first 5, right?
Correct. I did not see today's
okay,
episode.
good. Well, it's a good thing.
6 is the most eventful
yeah
episode by far, like in terms of like shit happening and kind of like
Yeah.
moving. Yeah, yeah.
But this, well, I mean, when this all came about, we knew from the very beginning, like even before Suicide Squad came out, that that they were going to be doing a Peacemaker series. So obviously we knew that Peacemaker wasn't going to die, and obviously you can tell if it's because this character is endearing. There's a lot of interesting stuff about him that you could build a show off of for sure. But obviously it's because it's John Cena. We know that through and through. But overall, what were your guys' expectations for the show after the conclusion of the Suicide Squad? Where did you think it was going to go, or how did you think that it was going to come about?
I thought
I
it
had
was
no
gonna be
idea.
good.
You thought it was gonna be good?
Yeah, I wasn't like expecting to be blown away by it, but I mean, one thing, Peacemaker, I hated him in the Suicide Squad movie for the right reasons. You're not supposed to like him.
Yeah, you're not supposed to like.
You're not supposed to like him. So I thought that was weird. I was like, that's not a very likable character to center a series around. But I was like, I like James Gunn a lot. I like his sense of humor. I know it's not for everybody, but I think he's pretty funny. I like his creativity. So I knew at the very least it was going to be a good show and it would be interesting. And I think in the first few episodes it was good and it's interesting. And I think once it hit the fourth episode, it started going from something good to something really, really good. The fifth episode, and by the sixth episode, which just came out, I'm fully on board. I think this is excellent and I like the storytelling. I like where it's going. And most important of all, it did something that it needed to do. I hated Peacemaker, and now I sympathize with him a lot. I still think he is not a good person, and I think he's done so much wrong. But I think the show does a good job of like humanizing him and making you understand him as a person a lot more,
Yeah.
and feeling certain levels of empathy for him, given what his life is like and what he's been through. And the show is so damn funny. And what I like about it is it's so funny and it's so fast, kind of like that James Gunn humor, but it doesn't sacrifice like tension or storytelling
Emotions.
and emotions.
Mhm.
And the last episode kind of had me depressed, to be honest, a little bit. I think some of it's pretty like heavy and it's kind of sad. And I think it's a good balance that I think it's sometimes hard to be that openly humorous and raunchy and kind of that irreverent attitude without sacrificing some of like more serious storytelling elements. And I think it's got a really good balance. It's funny, it's crude, but I also think that it's emotionally resonant. And I think the storyline keeps getting more and more exciting and more epic. And
Yeah.
I really like where it's going a lot.
Well, honestly, too, for me at least, I sympathize with the character from the very beginning, because when Waller is describing him to Bloodsport, she says he was trained to kill since birth from his father. Although you don't exactly see, so it was just that little hint of it where you can kind of tell, like, damn, this guy is the way he is, who has an skewed moral, ethical code, but is trying to do things for the right reasons. Doesn't realize he's not much of a joke because of how he was raised and because his father was the one who taught him to be this way. So I think from the very beginning, I did sympathize with him, because I just from that one line, that just little hint, and then we see that fully play out in this show. And it's crazy to me because Robert Patrick, who plays his father, Augie, is what, like in his 60s, and yeah, that dude is still freaking as intimidating as he was in the Terminator. Like, that dude can be 80, 90 years old, and I would probably like, if I saw him coming, I would just probably turn around and just run, just because that guy has such an intimidating presence, and you can definitely see why he was cast in this role. And I think the thing for me too, I'm just, because I know with that character specifically, there was a lot of reservations from Warner Brothers about his portrayal, because of him being a racist and him being a misogynist and him being pretty much every unredeemable, and to have every unredeemable trait a person can have. There was a lot of reservations and there was a lot of concern. Like, I don't think you should be portraying this character this way. This is not something we should do. And for James Gunn just to say, hey, this is what I do. This is how it's going to be. For him to like not cut anything out and not stray away from it, I definitely give a lot of respect and a lot of admiration for that, because even though this is a portrayal of a horrific human being, you can definitely, I think it makes the story that much stronger, just because you're allowed to sympathize with, like, there's somebody even worse than Peacemaker, and that he was raised by this man. You're just like, oh man, like what kind of childhood did this guy have to turn out this way? And not only that, but just knowing that his father pretty much says he hates him and is ready to disregard him at any moment, but yet he says, I love him. and he's always you see a lot of it, him trying to appeal to him and him just working for his approval. And I think that's one of the driving forces that makes Peacemaker. And that whole thing is just really good, and I can't express my respect for it enough.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that you bring that up, because have you, I guess a question for you guys, have you guys rewatched Suicide Squad since watching Peacemaker?
Mm-mm.
I've
I have
seen
been
it a
meaning to,
couple
but I was gonna
times.
wait till like the very end.
It whole new depth to
Really?
Peacemaker. Like I don't know if you can recall the scene when they're on the bus and they're talking about their fathers. Ratcatcher's talking about her father, and what was his name? Deadshot's talking about his, and
Bloodsport.
or Bloodsport, yeah. Deadshot.
Same role he's filmed.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, he's talking about his father and how they were raised, and you actually see Peacemaker like react to it. It's just a quick like blink and you'll miss it, but he like looks at them and he almost like chuckles, where he's like, "You think your parents were bad? Like you don't know my dad." And I was like, I rewatched it and I was like, this is incredible. Like James Gunn knew what he was gonna do with Peacemaker, and I'm pretty sure he had told John Cena like, "Hey, this is the backstory. This is where you're going with this," and like. And being able to rewatch that movie and seeing how he's acting throughout, it makes more sense.
Mm-hmm.
And where at first you kind of see Peacemaker in the movie as like, all right, he's just doing whatever Amanda Waller says, but it's not just that. Like you actually sympathize with what he's doing at the time, and I found myself almost like cheering for Peacemaker at the end of Suicide Squad. I was like, okay, like I get what he's doing now. It's not completely like batshit crazy.
He was still wrong though.
He was wrong. And a lot of what he does is wrong. But now when you're watching the show and you compare him to his dad, it's almost that comparison alone, that juxtaposition makes him look so much better.
Yeah,
definitely.
And then you have the like comparing him to Vigilante, right? Like, and how stuff that he does affects Vigilante, and you almost see stuff that his father did, how that affected him. It's really interesting seeing him in that position, and it's really cool to see. Yeah, I think that's crazy. Vigilante, I'm so proud of that character in this show. Like I think he's underrated because
he's great.
Yeah, and going back to the comic books, this is what I was saying about James Gunn just doing whatever the heck he wants with the character. Vigilante in the comic books was more like a cross between like Punisher and like Daredevil, because he's a lawyer, and his, I think his wife and kid got killed by this like gang. So then he decides to become a vigilante. At first he wasn't going to kill, but then he slowly digresses into like madness, and just kills bad people, just straight up. But James Gunn just did something completely different with this character, and I love what he's doing with him. I love that he like looks up to Peacemaker, and he almost like takes his ideals, and is like, there's no gray area for him like there is with Peacemaker sometimes. Right? Like when it came to shooting that kid, right? And he's like, move aside, I'll do it.
And
like,
he started humming or something, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yep, exactly. Like
gleefully sociopathic.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think Peacemaker is starting to see himself in Vigilante, and is kind of, I think this is the start of his redemption arc, because he sees almost like a mirror of himself.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but then there's a lot of discussion amongst the team too. Like, this guy's a psychopath. This guy is insane. This guy is out of his mind. So I think him stepping away and being involved in those conversations, like seeing them like, damn, this is how they react to Vigilante. Like, how do they react to me? Or what is it that other? Yeah. And you see that too with him. He characterizes himself as a hero, but then hearing all the other stuff, and people are like, no, you're not a hero. You know, Batman's a hero. Aquaman's a hero. And that funny dialogue between him and Jamil that opened the series, like, oh, bro, that was just so golden.
Yeah.
I like his whole, the neighbor who starts telling him, you don't have a coterie of supervillains.
Oh, coterie, I know.
That's because they're all underground. And then he's like, well, that's why you're not a superhero. And he's like, because Batman's a candy ass. And his whole rant was funny. And it's funny because it's a rant you've heard so many times in fanboy circles about how many people Batman has murdered by allowing all these characters to live, and they only go on and kill more people. So I thought that was funny. But I want to get back to Robert Patrick. I think that's a great villain. I think that's like a villain, and I could see why they might be hesitant because it's pretty controversial in terms of why he's a villain. But I mean, in the real world, if superheroes actually existed, we probably would have a super villain like that. And
Yep.
what's more evil than a white supremacist and a misogynist he's just an all-around terrible person? But it's a great performance, and if people don't like it, the only thing I could say is he's not supposed to be a good guy. Villains are supposed to be dislikable. They're evil. That's what makes them villains, and I think he really sells it. You got to see the last episode, Eric, but like
don't want to give it away, but
it's something bigger with him. But I'm excited to see where White Dragon goes. Really good villain.
And that's another that with getting back to what Eric said with James Gunn just taking the inspiration from the comics and then running wild with it. He's actually not. They don't really go into Peacemaker's father in the comics, but there is a character called White Dragon who he's a combination of two characters who is like a Nazi. So that was a cool little thing where they incorporated that into the character, and that being who the White Dragon is. So stuff like that is really cool, where you can have your sources of inspiration and kind of just do whatever you want with it, or take free reign to craft your own unique, interesting story. I think James Gunn is really, really good at that.
Yeah.
And how do you guys like the theme, the title opening?
Yeah. The first time I saw it, I thought it was hilarious. It really sets the tone for the show, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the funnest opening title sequences of any show I've ever seen. It was not what I expected, but all the cast dancing, and I like that it's like even the most minor characters in the show.
Jamil, and then the old white neighbor too.
Yeah, the neighbor comes in. The guy comes in with like a mop, dressed as a janitor. The whole thing is funny. Even the dad, I think it's just funny because
and him
White
like
Dragon is supposed to be a villain, and then you see him come out doing this goofy dance. Like, it's hilarious. I think it's great. I don't skip past it because it always makes me giggle.
Yeah, I think it really captures the essence of the show. Like, you see them all stone faced and they're doing this dance, and you're seeing all this ridiculousness and all this absurdity, but yet it's super serious. And I think that it really just captures and really catapults what the essence of the show is, where there's a lot of goofy stuff, there's a lot of absurd, ridiculous things, but it's still serious. There's still a lot of emotion, a lot of heart attached to it. And it's funny too, because since Vigilante is dressed up and you can't see his face, he's the only fully masked character. It seems when he's doing the movements like he's having a wonderful time, or like he's just having this. I picture him having this big smile on his face while looking at everybody else, and they're all stone-faced, super serious.
And you know, that's another thing. I think I like all of the supporting characters on the show. There isn't one character that I don't like or I don't care about to some extent. I like the entire team, even the dumber members. But I that's what I like about the show is like the last episode had a moment where something could have went wrong from multiple characters on different sides of the fence, and I was worried about the safety for all of them.
Yeah.
And that's not something that you can get too often, where I sympathize with the detectives who are working on it. I sympathize with the team members. I sympathize with Amanda Waller's daughter. I don't know if I sympathize with Vigilante, but I think he's so cool and he's so fun to watch, and I love his moment in the prison.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that was such a badass moment.
Yeah, it was badass because I think you got a good idea of like, oh, he actually knows what he's doing. Like, he's not just crazy and he's going to go in there and he's going to like try to fight and get his ass kicked. Like, he went in there and he actually did work on them.
Yeah.
I think that was really cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
Because the whole time I was thinking, like, is this dude just like is he just dressed up and he just playing the hero? And
is he like a kick-ass?
Yeah. But he actually did really good, and I thought it was really cool. That character, that actor, I actually saw him on another show on Netflix. It was a sitcom.
Freddie Stroma.
No.
That's
the
actor's name. He plays Vigilante.
Oh yeah. I saw him on this other show where he played like a race car driver, and he plays almost a similar character.
Speed Racer?
Like, no, not Speed Racer. No, it's like a NASCAR comedy sitcom.
Oh, okay.
But the show didn't do that well. But I always enjoyed him. I enjoyed his character and what he brought to the table. And I was just really pleasantly surprised to see him in this show and how well he's doing with this character, because I think there's still depth to the character. Like you see hints of jealousy all the time, and you see hints of him like actually like trying to decide, okay, what's the best thing to do in these situations, and sometimes I feel like he when it comes to like fighting during fight scenes, he's the smartest one on the team. Like I just remember when they were fighting the gorilla, like everyone kind of like jumped at the gorilla or try to get the gorilla. He comes in, he like stabs it and turns around and runs away. He's like, I need to like get in and get out. Like I
More
feel like
tactical.
yeah, he's more tactical. I think he has a better idea sometimes of what he's doing and he deserves more credit than he's given by the rest of the team sometimes. But
Definitely.
again, I think the team, especially the last episode that I watched, it seems like they're coming together, and
Yeah.
they're really like, I think that was the whole point, right? To eventually get them to be a team to fight this like bigger threat that's looming over everything.
Yeah.
You see them kind of growing on each other a lot. Even people who
Yeah.
didn't like each other, who thought other characters were just ridiculous, you could
Yeah.
see them kind of growing like a certain kind of fondness. One thing else I wanted to say about Vigilante, the actor Freddie Stroma, I don't know if you guys heard about this, but you know that they shot 5.5 episodes with a different actor in the role. And
Oh, I did hear about
had
that.
creative differences with James Gunn. So he ended up leaving. So James Gunn had to, even on the episodes he doesn't direct, any episode that has the character of Vigilante, they had to go in and reshoot every scene with a new actor for the first 5.5 episodes. And I can't tell. Like, I think it's pretty seamless.
That's pretty cool.
That's really good.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, he got lucky there.
Yeah, definitely.
The other actor didn't work out.
It just seems like this just fits James Gunn so well.
Oh yeah.
Like he finally had free reign to just do whatever the hell he wanted, to go as graphic, as brutal, as crazy as he wanted, and then just like, okay, this is what it's like. I'm finally. He just seems like he's just at home and in his nature essentially.
And I feel like I've noticed like a lot of like filmmakers tend to do better on television than they do in movies, because, and I'm a movie guy more than a television person, but television offers a certain type of storytelling that allows you to build things in a way that you can't do in a movie. Even in a long movie, you still don't have the freedom to do like I feel like TV has the benefits of movies and books in the way that like the qualities of a movie, but the way that a book feels, or a graphic novel where you can like get used to characters over time and like really go in deep and let the characters play out before the suspense builds. And when it gets to the more tense parts, it's more intense than they are in any of the movies. So I really think like the television format is working. It's the same thing with like the Marvel shows. I stuff like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which to me was such a nuanced show. I don't think it would have been as good if they had to fit that all like into a 2.5 hour movie. There's something about the television format that allows these characters and these stories to breathe a lot more. That makes it a lot more
it feels like it's stronger. Like it definitely has that more impact because we're seeing it once every week. So we're just seeing that slow growth, and there's building up that anticipation. Like, I just want to just finish this whole now. And part of that, I know, like when WandaVision came out, a lot of people were upset that feeling that it was moving too slow, or a lot of whatever.
Isn't it fun to look forward to something every week, like to have it on television?
But I think it just builds that impact, and it builds that story more and more. And I think you definitely have more affinity and more appreciation for it, because I know I definitely do. From like where it started off in the very beginning, and slowly you're seeing Peacemaker become more and more reluctant as those words really hammer home to him. The Rick Flag's last words, as they really hammer home to him, Peacemaker, what a joke. And now you see him like, we thought he was just 100% in his conviction and he didn't have any remorse or he didn't have any doubts. And now you're seeing that play out over time. And that's really a crazy just character development that's happening.
I've seen Suicide Squad a couple of times, but I haven't watched it since I started watching Peacemaker, but I definitely want to now. It seems like thinking back, a lot of it is a show that he puts on. It's just projecting what he wants to be or what he thinks he's supposed to be, and also trying to kind of live up to his father in a way, because it seems like he's always trying to please him or prove himself to his dad. So looking back, it seems more like this is who I'm supposed to be. Like you not really seeing everything about who Peacemaker is.
Exactly.
And I think that's cool that they actually the story arc actually starts in the movie and goes into the TV show. And like Eric said, I chose James Gunn's intelligence and his foresight to kind of like know where it's going and to have the seeds planted, even if the audience isn't aware at the time.
Exactly.
When you look back, you'll start to see it.
I don't know if you guys caught this, but did you guys catch that statue, the bunny statue that was in Vigilante's car?
No.
No.
You guys didn't catch it? They like Peacemaker looks at it briefly, and the camera shows it for like a second. You guys didn't pick up what that was?
Nope.
So it said it's a statue, a bunny holding a sign that says "Obstacles are opportunities," and that was on the shirt of what Rick Flag wore in the Suicide Squad, but it said it in Spanish, "Obstacles are opportunities." And he looks at that and he looks at Vigilante. So I'm like wondering too if that's like something too of like him thinking and him really quelling those doubts or really having those like complications within himself. That was like a little like nod. I wasn't sure if anybody really caught it.
That's really cool. No, I had not had that.
Yeah.
And what about for you guys? Who would you say is the standout? Would you say Vigilante, or was there anybody else that you guys felt really caught your eye or really was just like shining the light on?
That's hard to say because John Cena has so much goofy charisma that he steals the spotlight every time he's on camera. But Freddie Stroma as Vigilante is really kick-ass, and he's cool in his own right. Then you have Robert Patrick stands out. I like the entire team. Jennifer Holland plays Harcourt. That's actually James Gunn's girlfriend. I like her a lot.
Beer Died is good too.
Yeah, Danielle Brooks as Leota. Like, it's hard to say because, I mean, maybe they don't all have the same level of charisma, but I'm actually invested in all of their stories. Even the cops even the detectives are interesting and likable to me.
Yeah.
Am I the only one invested in Eagly?
Oh, Eagly's cool.
Eagly's the standout for sure.
Yeah, dude.
I mean, he didn't see Peacemaker for how long, and he hugged him.
Yeah. Oh, what I don't know how much of an Easter egg this really would be, or a callback to the movie, but I know in Suicide Squad, if you pay attention, no one except for Ratcatcher and Peacemaker acknowledged the rat as like a person. And when they're in the scene in the bar, and they get
he says one for the rat, right?
He says one for our friend, and so he's implying like you need to get one for the rat too.
Yeah.
And you actually see how much he cares for animals, obviously with Eagly, but even with the parasite, he still has it in a jar. He didn't kill it. And I thought that was really interesting. That was pointed out to me in a TikTok. But I thought it was really cool how you see how obviously he's affectionate towards his pets, but he understood that Ratcatcher's rat was important to her.
Exactly.
So he's like, no, I'm gonna acknowledge the rat as a person.
Yeah.
Because it's a pet. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, a little insight to character.
I actually didn't notice that, but then again, I didn't see Peacemaker by the time I saw Suicide Squad, so
yeah,
I didn't realize, like, thinking about that makes a lot of sense, how much James Gunn was actually laying the groundwork, and how, even without you realizing, he was actually showing more layers of humanity than you thought they were showing at the beginning.
Yeah. It might not even be him like laying the groundwork for Peacemaker. It could just be him fully understanding like his characters in his movies. Like, I'm gonna create a past and a future for this character, and I want the actors to understand who this character is when they're portraying them. Right. So I that's how I saw it, and I thought it was really cool.
Makes sense.
Yeah, for me, definitely John Cena is a standout. In other movies I've seen him, he's always really been comedy, and I mean his older movies when he was like still in the WWE, it was just like weird action star movies.
I mean, come on, man, like, The Marine is my favorite movie of all time. That's not your, and plus that was with Robert Patrick. So
the Marine, that's funny. But I mean, even I was just gonna say, I think he's really coming to his own as an actor in this one, and I can like, I can really see him as not necessarily a serious actor, but as a big like comedic star on the level of like maybe even The Rock moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, definitely.
I think that shows how good the show is. The only thing I want to say is John Cena is obviously the standout because he's the star.
Yeah.
But the fact that the entire cast is as likable as it is, and you could leave the Peacemaker character alone and spend time with the other characters and still find pleasure in it or still find fun in it, I think shows the quality of the character development. And just, I mean, you even saw it in the Guardians of the Galaxy's movies, how good James Gunn is working with large cast of characters and making
Exactly.
and care and like all of them.
I will say I didn't like Economist until Peacemaker liked him.
Yeah, I agree.
And I wanted to talk about the soundtrack for the show.
Yeah, that was something I was gonna mention too.
Yeah, dude, it's so good. The soundtrack, like the classic rock and those vibes, perfectly fit Peacemaker and the show. And they're not bringing back just like classic rock,
like glam rock too. Obviously, Poison. They mentioned Poison.
Yeah, like they're bringing back like these lesser known bands too from that time, from like the 80s. And I love it. Like I think it's really cool to see it play out, and it's almost like a theme. And if you really pay attention, like I tend to watch these shows with subtitles on. Sometimes the lyrics of the songs that are playing perfectly match what's happening in the scene many times.
Oh, like that happens. I mean, heck, even in the theme song, do you really want to taste it?
Exactly. Yeah. So definitely the soundtrack, it's so good, and I'm really enjoying listening to all those songs.
Yeah. I just wanted to get back to, I didn't get to say who I thought was a standout. Actually, for me, was Danielle Brooks. Is that her name? Danielle Brooks? Adebayo? Yeah. She, to me, is a standout because I feel that she's the heart and the soul of this show. And I think she's the one that really starts bringing out those emotions and really starts putting those seeds in where Peacemaker is starting to look in the mirror at the kind of person he really is. And is the one to actually connect with him on a personal level, like was the first one to connect with him on a personal level, trying to touch eagerly and then having that conversation. So, and not only that, but she also is confronting herself because she obviously sees how Augie is, how horrible of a person he is, seeing like, oh, your dad is horrible, your dad is this, and then hearing the other team say, oh yeah, we about Amanda Waller being horrible, or oh we like stuff about that also starts to you really see a lot of those parallels between bad father and then bad mother. And obviously we know how ruthless and just how I won't say crazy, but just how truly, I won't say evil, but being evil for the sake of the greater good that Waller can be.
Yeah.
And then her finally confronting that.
Evil.
So I'm sorry?
I think Waller's evil.
Well, let's say evil for the greater good.
Yeah. In her mind. But the only thing I want to say is I feel like the big parallel that's coming is that moment where she's talking to Vigilante about Peacemaker's father and how there's nothing good there and how she needs to accept it. I think that's kind of hinting at her parallel character arc that have to come to this own realization too about their mother, if you think about it, because they both are in similar situations.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, the show is really awesome, and I really hope that this gives a lot of faith to Warner Brothers to really just take more chances, because this is the first show that we've had connected to the DCEU. Yeah, we've had Titans, we've had Doom Patrol, but those are existing in their own universe like we were talking about earlier. So I really think with this thing being a success, and obviously it's like the highest rated content on streaming services, so I think that's a really, really good thing. Like in Netflix, not just with HBO MAX, but Netflix, Disney Plus,
it's
Amazon.
It's easily the best show out right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I really hope that with the success the show's having, it's going to give them an incentive more to. And obviously, we know actually there's going to be another spin-off of a Suicide Squad character that James Gunn is working at. We don't know which, but there's another one coming. So I hope that we get to have more of these shows existing in their universe, because I think having it all connect together and then, having those moments organically where you talk, oh, you're a hero like Aquaman. Oh, you're a hero like Batman. And then having him go into criticizing Batman for his personal code of ethics and morals. I really think that that's rewarding stuff and more stuff I want to see. So hopefully this will be that incentive for them to do that more.
Good.
But with all that being said, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Make sure you guys watch Peacemaker. It is freaking awesome. It has 2 more episodes. We're going to cover it on a week-by-week basis. And make sure you check out Higher Passion Entertainment on YouTube. Check out their other podcasts. And we have a lot of stuff for whatever need and whatever passion you have. So All that being said, we're the Heroes of Mutants podcast. We'll see you later.
Yeah.